Mary Alice Roth woke up and stared at the big old trunk, which may as well have been a reflection. Unmoved for years, the hunk of carved, glossy hardwood sat under the window in her bedroom because she'd lost the only people strong enough to lift it somewhere else. At her age, the number of able bodies in a household doesn't tend to change, and neither does the way you sleep, which meant Mary Alice, the sole inhabitant of 4 County Road 1818 for over 10 years and a left-side sleeper since she was in a crib, knew that for the rest of her life, the first thing she'd see in the morning would be a hideous antique trunk she hated more than just about anything else in the world. And now she couldn't get rid of it even if she tried, unless she wanted to throw out her back and spend hours moaning on the floor hoping someone would knock on the door and check on her. It was that sort of terrible, bottomless pit of a fact that made her wish she were dead. But she wasn't, not today at least. So she silenced the buzzing clock and began another week of living. What else was there for her to do anyhow? For most of her 63 years, Mary Alice held a grudging respect for mornings and the way they provided a solid foundation to the structure of her busy days. But lately, they'd felt absurd. Starting a new day knowing you had nothing to make or do was utterly ridiculous, maybe even sinful. Monotony was only acceptable if imbued with some sort of greater purpose, like providing for a family or teaching math to the bright-eyed youth of small-town America. And Mary Alice hadn't figured out her new one yet. But a tiny, if fading, speck of hope that she would eventually sort out this stage of her life remained. So she flipped off the covers with a grunt and twisted her tall, bony body out of the four-poster. Seated, feet on the floor, she kept her eyes on that trunk as she offered the house a single droning sigh, a reminder that she was still here, and stood. Her joints were old, but they didn't creak. Her body was tired, but it didn't ache. Frailty would have been a welcome excuse to let herself wallow horizontally a little longer. But like all the women in her family, who had been growing old in this part of Texas since arriving from Germany some 150 years ago, she was cursed with good health and a revulsion to wasted time. Today was the first day of classes at Billington Independent School District, a sprawling complex of small to smallish red brick buildings and rusty tin just off the old highway, which itself was just off the new highway, the past butt up against the present. Had this been a normal year, Mary Alice Roth would have been among the scores of other employees getting there early to memorize a handwritten seating chart she hid in the locked top drawer of her matte green metal desk, drinking warm coffee out of a thick mug stamped with a faded BHS logo, and basking in the light from the wall of windows she refused to obscure with decorations. But today, Mary Alice was exactly where she'd been for the past 3 months. She was home. Earlier that summer, a few weeks into her district-mandated exile, or compulsory leave, or forced retirement, or whatever flowery term they ultimately chose to call it once that Josie Kerr swooped in and took over her old classroom, Mary Alice confronted 2 fundamental things about herself. The first was that she hated doing nothing. The second was that without a job, she had nothing to do. That her next-door neighbor, Ellie Hall, happened to call at the very moment of her epiphany one June morning was lucky for the both of them, as the friendly check-in, one of their long-standing regular chats that was comforting, if superficial and always the same, quickly became an even friendlier standing invitation.